Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high.
How would I feel if I had no home, especially on long, dark, cold, windy nights in the winter? How would I feel if I had no home as I walk past heated church buildings, office buildings, standing empty every night? How would I feel if I had no home as I walk past dozens of empty houses where no one lives? How would I feel if I had no home as I walk past luxury mansions, 8, 10, 12 rooms, where only 1 or 2 persons live? How would I feel if I had no home? Albuquerque has many people who have no home, possibly 3,000 to 4,000. I urge you to call the mayor, call all city councilors, all 9 of them. I called them many months ago. Tell them to put people in need first before every other project in this city. I call for the city to provide decent, small, sunny homes to every person who needs and wants a place to live, if they agree to take good care of it. If I were given free the most luxurious mansion in this city, I would not keep it. I would be ashamed as hell to live in it. Why would I want a larger home than my one sunny room when many millions worldwide and thousands here have no home? Yes, I greatly enjoy my 114 square foot home. It's a rented room, 9.5 by 12 feet, in the house of a friend. I've lived there for over 11 and a half years. And this is my favorite place I've ever lived in my 76 years, except for the Illinois farmhouse where I grew up, where I had deep, long-time family roots, many memories. But that Illinois farmhouse was much larger, 10 rooms plus attic and basement, much larger than what I need or want. And one big reason I so greatly enjoy my 9.5 foot by 12 foot rented room home now is it has 6 windows, 3 on the east, 3 on the south. I love lots of sunshine, natural light. I would hate to live in any dark dungeon of a room or a house. For many hundreds of years, people were tortured, punished, by being locked up in cells with 1 or no windows. I want light. where I live. During the Vietnam War, Johnny Cash wrote the song, performed it, What is Truth? He performed it at the White House, and President Richard Nixon heard him. President Richard Nixon murdered thousands of families in Vietnam. Nixon squirmed in his seat as Johnny sang, What is Truth? The old man turned off the radio, said, Where did all the old songs go? Kids sure play funny music these days. They play it in the strangest ways. Said, It looks to me like they've all gone wild. It was peaceful back when I was a child. Well, man, could it be that the girls and boys are trying to be heard above your noise? And the lonely voice of youth cries, What is truth? A little boy of 3 sitting on the floor looks up and says, Daddy, what is war? The little boy of 3 says, then the daddy says, Son, that's when people fight and die. The little boy of 3 says, Daddy, why? A young man of 17 in Sunday school being taught the golden rule, which is treat others the way you want to be treated. And by the time another year has gone around, it may be his turn to lay his life down. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking, What is truth? A young man sitting on the witness stand, the man with the book says, Raise your hand, repeat after me, I solemnly swear. The man looked down at his long hair, and although the young man solemnly swore, nobody seems to hear it anymore. And it didn't really matter if the truth was there. It was the cut of his clothes and the length of his hair. And the lonely voice of youth cries, What is truth? The young girl dancing to the latest beat has found new ways to move her feet. The young man speaking in the city square is trying to tell somebody that he cares. Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are going to be the leaders in a little while. This old world's wakened to a newborn day, and I solemnly swear that it'll be their way. You better help the voice of youth find what is truth. Johnny Cash's song that he wrote, What is Truth? He performed it in the White House as President Richard Nixon, with the blood of thousands of families on his hands from the Vietnam War, squirmed in his seat. It's hell to feel terribly torn in 2 directions. It was hell to feel terribly torn between 2 people I loved. It was one of the worst days of my life. It was after Christmas 1981, almost 40 years ago. I was 36. My mother was 74. And just the 2 of us that day in our Illinois farmhouse. My mother was born and I grew up in that house. The phone rang. It was my beloved Don calling from New Mexico or Colorado. And when my mother heard it was Don, she looked upset. I felt terribly torn between my mother, who deeply loved me, deeply needed me, because she had been sick so many years, very sick, and this young, gay, attractive man, Don, who called me. And after the phone call, I went upstairs to my room. I got the money my mother and Dad had given me for Christmas. I came down. I threw the money on the floor. I told my mother, to hell with you and your money. I'm leaving. I went out the door. I walked up the country road. I turned around. I walked back to the house. I stood outside, and I saw and I heard my mother inside crying desperately like an orphan in the universe. She was, as I said, a very sick woman for many years. What if she had had a stroke or a heart attack and died that day because of my leaving? How would I have ever explained what happened to our family? Would they have ever forgiven me? Would I have forgiven myself? Eventually, I went inside, and she was so glad that I came back. She reached out her dear arms to hug me, but sadly, I refused her hugs at that moment. One of the many things I would aim to change in my life, if I had my life to live over, knowing what I know now. And that day was one of the worst days of my life. The memory haunts me. The memory humbles me. The memory is riveted in my mind. And now, almost 40 years later, I would love to hug my mother 1,000,000 times if I could. I look back now and I see the heavy pressures on her and the heavy pressures on me at that moment, that day. On my mother's side, I was her closest friend. She needed me. She deeply appreciated my help. I took her to many doctors in different states. She had suffered, trapped in a sick, fat body for many years. And she had never met Don in person. But she greatly feared if Don or some other man became my lover, she would lose some of her closeness with me. She had invited her very special friend and his family to visit us during the Christmas season there on the farm, but they did not come. I did many things for her she was not able to do for herself. And now, that day, she felt I was rejecting her, abandoning her, when I got so very angry and walked up the road. On my side, the pressures. I hate the cold and snow of winters in Illinois. I was homesick for my life and my friends in Albuquerque. She and I had had a huge argument months before about my human right to have a lover companion. No one in the world will ever love me more than my mother did. Probably no one will ever love me as much. I had been a preacher many years before that day. I had worked with many youth in Illinois, Arizona, Albuquerque. I had hosted a radio program in Albuquerque. But that day, I tasted hell as I felt terribly torn between my mother and Don. She was my all-time closest friend. 6 weeks or so after that, as she lay in the hospital the day before she died, she told me, "I love you." And I told her, "I love you," in our last conversation. The next morning, her sister, my dad, and I were with her in intensive care as she gasped her last breath. Our lives have many very painful, precious memories and lessons. I want to be with my mother, my dad, Don, all my many loved ones in a much better place beyond death. I want that. I question if anybody in the world wants it more than I want it. But I strongly doubt that happens. Wanting something deeply, fervently, does not make it so. Why bullshit myself when I do not know if there is life beyond the grave and if we will be together with our loved ones? A powerful piece by a retired Albuquerque police sergeant, Dan Klein, entitled "An Ex-Cop's Fear Living in a Police State." He writes, "It's summer 1942 when you watch as police officers descend on your neighbor's house. You have known the neighbors for many years, never had a problem with them. The officers quickly force the neighbor, his wife, his children, into a police van, and they drive away, forced to leave all their property behind as they are placed in internment camps. Their crime? Being Americans of Japanese ancestry. It's springtime in 1965 in Selma, Alabama, and you watch as protesters peacefully marching for equal rights are beaten, attacked with police dogs, shot with high-pressure water from fire hoses. Their crime? Being black in the South and not accepting their pre-designated position in life. It's 2011, and you're standing in line at any number of county clerk's offices in America as a gay couple is attempting to obtain a marriage license. They're denied, but refuse to leave until police officers are called and arrest them. Their crime? Wanting the same rights and benefits that other married couples receive. It's 2016 in Maricopa County, Arizona. You watch as deputies take your middle-aged neighbor and his wife away while their children scream and cry for them to stop. Their crime? Working illegally in the United States for 20 years. Their children were born here. They were not. They will be deported and the children raised by who knows? Police officers swear an oath to protect their communities, enforce the law, and support the Constitution. What does a police officer do when the majority of a community is harming a minority of the community? When the laws are illegal and harmful to their community? When the laws they're supposed to enforce are in opposition to the Constitution they swore to uphold? What would you do if your neighbor, an American citizen, was being sent to a concentration camp solely because of their faith or ancestry? Would you voice your opposition? Would you intervene? Would you jeer at them while they were driven away? What would you do if you saw police beating unarmed, peaceful protesters? Would you mumble that they are getting what they deserve? Would you stand with the protesters? Or would you close your door and say nothing? Did you stand with gay couples who simply wanted the same rights guaranteed to others under the Constitution? Or did you say it didn't involve you? Or did you complain that others asking for the same rights you enjoy somehow would harm you? Would you take in the children of those undocumented immigrants whose only crime was trying to provide their children a better life? Would you say they caused their own problems because they should have waited years to be citizens? Would you turn your back on their children while caring for your own children? This has been a dilemma that I have thought about for years. And the man writing this, as I said earlier, is a former Albuquerque police sergeant, retired Dan Klein. He says, "How would I have acted if I were a member of the Alabama State Patrol on the Edmund Pettus Bridge that day in 1965? Would I have tried to stop the violence my fellow officers were inflicting upon American citizens who simply wanted to be treated as equals? Or would I have joined in the beatings? If I had been a member of a California police department in 1942, would I have blamed every American of Japanese ancestry for Pearl Harbor? Would I have smiled as I forced American families to suffer in internment camps Or would I have refused to act, saying that this was an illegal, unconstitutional act? Because of Albuquerque's status as a sanctuary city and a welcoming city to gay couples, I never had to confront these issues, says Dan Klein, the retired Albuquerque police sergeant. But would I have had the courage to stand up for those members of our community? James Madison, a drafter of our Constitution, stated that the Bill of Rights would protect individuals from abuse by a majority, unquote. But there have been laws that violate the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and humanity. What then? Does a police officer have a legal and ethical responsibility to his oath, community, and nation to refuse to enforce those laws? From 1898 to 1931, 33 years, Smedley Butler was a member of the U.S. Marine Corps. And by the time he retired, he had achieved what was then the Marine Corps' highest rank. And by the time he died in 1940, at 58, he had more decorations, including 2 Medals of Honor, than any other Marine. And during his years in the Marine Corps, he was sent to the Philippines at the time of the uprising against the U.S. occupation of the Philippines. He was sent to China, sent to France during World War I, to Mexico, Central America, and Haiti. Butler shocked a good many people when in 1935, 4 years after he was out of the Marines, he wrote these words: I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer. I was a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City bank boys to collect revenue in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown Brothers in 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, I helped to see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was to operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. The powerful confession of Smedley Butler who had achieved the highest ranking in the U.S. Marine Corps, but later saw how evil what he did really was. That same year that he wrote that, 1935, Butler published a short book. And Butler opened that book with these words: "War is a racket. It always has been." He said it's possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It's the only one international in scope. It's the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. He says, for a great many years as a soldier, I had a suspicion that war was a racket. Not until I retired to civilian life did I fully realize it. He closed his book with, "To hell with war." And writing in the mid-1930s, Butler looked ahead and saw a U.S. war with Japan to protect trade with China and investments in the Philippines, and declared that it would make no sense to the average person in the United States. Smedley Butler said, "We would all be stirred up to hate Japan and go to war, a war that might well cost us tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of lives of Americans, and many more hundreds of thousands of physically maimed and mentally unbalanced men. And of course, for this loss, there would be a compensating profit. Fortunes would be made. Millions and billions of dollars would be piled up by a few. Weapons makers, bankers, shipbuilders, manufacturers, meat packers, speculators, they would fare well. But what does it profit the men who are killed? What does it profit their mothers and sisters, their wives, their sweethearts? What does it profit their children? What does it profit anyone except the very few to whom war means huge profits?" Bonnie Ware was a caregiver for many years to people who were dying. And she says these are the top 5 regrets of the dying. Number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. That was the number 1 regret of the dying that the people she worked with. Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Spending more time with family and friends is far more important, far more satisfying than working longer hours to buy much stuff that nobody needs and that will end up in the landfill. 3, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Many people are afraid to stand up publicly for what they believe is right because they fear rejection by their family, by neighbors, work buddies. Many people get illnesses connected to the bitterness the resentment they carry inside toward those people for making them feel afraid to live and speak honestly as they want to. Number 4, I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. Many people put making more money to buy more stuff ahead of past precious, close friendships. People that they haven't talked with by phone or in person, haven't written to for many years, and yet they once loved deeply. Friendship is a priceless gift that cannot be bought or sold, and its value is far greater than a mountain made of gold. And number 5, regret of the dying. I wish that I had let myself be happier. We can often choose to make lemonade from life's lemons. We can often turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones. And notice I say often. I'm not saying always, but often. We can often turn life's shit into fertilizer to make us wiser, to make us more understanding, to make us more compassionate toward others. Being free to make good changes until the day we die, not controlled by what other people think, by what other people say. I really wish we had a fair, loving, all-powerful parent God who would rescue all people who fervently prayed for help from war, starvation, cancer, addiction, tornadoes, drought, drunk drivers, rape, family violence, blindness, false charges, drones, torture, or much more. Hundreds of millions of people throughout human history have prayed desperately to God, the best they knew how, and received no help. Did Jesus of Nazareth actually live? If he did the writers of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the Bible accurately tell Jesus' teachings, his actions? And in centuries since, did those people who copied and translated the original writings do a good job? Make no important mistakes? Huge questions. Who knows for sure? The Bible says Jesus spoke about God as a loving Father who would answer prayers and give what we ask for. Matthew 7:11, where Jesus allegedly is speaking. If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Matthew 18:19. Again, I say to you, if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. Matthew 21:22. And whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. Now, if Jesus actually lived, and if he sincerely said those verses, he was sadly deluded about God and reality. No matter how well-meaning, he was not telling the truth. Talk about politicians' false promises to voters. Talk about companies' fake advertising to sell products. These verses are false advertising for God. I'm humbled to realize that I spread this false advertising for God for many years. I was a sincere Christian preacher in the 1960s, 55 years ago. I had not yet learned to question the Bible deeply. I had not yet learned to reject what is false, what is a lie. I thank many people who helped me open my eyes, my mind. Read the Bible, if you're going to read it, with extreme caution always. Spit out as much dangerous poison. Take to heart its precious wisdom. Aim to live that wisdom. The Bible's precious wisdom calls us to love, to forgive, to do good to our enemies, to conquer evil with good, to apologize and make amends when we wrong others, to live simply, to reject addiction to money and status, and to treat everybody as we want them to treat us. From the words of the song by Buffy St. Marie, the universal soldier. He's 5'2", he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all of 31, he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic, a Hindu, an atheist, a Jain, a Buddhist, a Baptist, and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill. And he knows he always will. Killing you for me, my friend, and me for you. And he's fighting for Canada, he's fighting for France, he's fighting for the USA, and he's fighting for the Russians, and he's fighting for Japan, and he thinks we put an end to war this way. And he's fighting for democracy, he's fighting for the Reds. He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die. And he never sees the writing on the wall. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon of the war, and without him, all this killing can't go on. He's the universal soldier. And he really is to blame. His orders come from far away. No more. They come from here and there and you and me and brothers. Can't you see? This is not the way we put the end to war. Buffy St. Marie's powerful song, The Universal Soldier. Thomas was a doctor who loved farming. He gave up being a doctor to work in a nursing home so he could also have time to farm. Thomas believed nursing homes must inspire the residents to have a reason to live. So he urged the nursing home to bring in birds, cats, dogs, to cure the boredom, the loneliness, the helplessness that people in nursing homes suffer. The nursing home got 100 parakeets, 4 dogs, 2 cats, some rabbits and chickens. And the 100 parakeets came on the same day, but with no cage. The cages came later. And the old people laughed and laughed as they watched the staff catch the birds, the 100 parakeets. And the nursing home brought plants, a vegetable garden, and made a daycare center at the nursing home for the children of the staff. And all of this made a huge difference for these old people. A huge good change in the people living there. The use of prescription drugs dropped by 1/2. A 30% decrease in drug costs, and 15% less deaths. Most nursing homes can keep their people alive, but do not help them to enjoy living. But the animals, the garden, the children helped the people in that nursing home to enjoy living. Why is marriage called tying the knot? I don't want anyone tied in a knot to me. And I urge every couple, 2 men, 2 women, man and woman, every couple considering marriage to ask themselves this question: do I ever know myself or the other person or the future well enough to know for sure we both will do well with only each other romantically until death? I repeat the question: do I ever know myself or the other person or the future well enough to know for sure we both will do well with only each other romantically until death? I aim to tell the truth. I aim not to make foolish promises. A solemn vow that many make and many break or want to break, a solemn vow I refuse to make to any human being on earth. I've been in love with certain men, and I treasure mutually passionate romance with certain men. But I do not want to be caged by him, nor to cage any man romantically for life. I want him to stay close to me because he wants to, and not because he feels trapped in a legal box. And like many people, I'm able to be openly, honestly in love with more than one person at a time, at the same time. No one person can fill all our emotional needs. And if he and I part, I don't want to sue him, and I do not want him to sue me. Marriage partners often take each other for granted and slack off from exercise and staying healthy. It's like, now I have somebody, what the hell? I don't have to worry. And they often turn to booze or to junk food or to buying crap they don't need in order to comfort them in their cage with their partner. And married couples often hold each other back and use each other as an excuse not to change, not to grow. And blaming the other, one says, I cannot stop eating meat or sugar because she or he has that stuff here. I can't resist eating it. Or one says, I would live simply in a much smaller place, but she or he refuses to change. Marriage partners often act as if they own each other. So they try to control each other and get insanely jealous. Now, some people may do best with only one romantic partner for life, but even they would be wise never to pledge themselves only to each other romantically until death. And as the years pass, they can check if they both are doing well in this relationship only with each other. And some people have their number one romantic relationship with one person for decades, but also enjoy close friendship, pleasurable sex with other persons, and do it honestly and openly with their main partner. Some people are able to be deeply in love with two or more persons at the same time for years and do it openly and honestly with little or no jealousy. The rule of no sex for couples outside marriage often breeds lies, cover-ups, heavy frustration, boredom, even violent jealousy. Marriage often becomes a duel instead of a duet. My parents might have been much better friends had they never married. Marriage destroys many friendships, and some couples become better friends after divorce. My parents were not a good match. If I had been my mother, I do not know how I could have coped being married to my dad. If I had been my dad, I do not know how I could have coped being married to my mother. They were married 48 years until my mother died. It often was emotional war, a war of words, hurt feelings, rage. My mother needed, my mother wanted, my mother was capable of much deeper intimacy than my dad gave her, or perhaps even was able to give her. I learned from my mother and dad not to get or stay trapped in a rotten marriage, making each other miserable. And far worse than having no romantic companion is feeling trapped by a vow to someone I no longer want to be with, or to someone who no longer wants to be with me. My mother and my dad were miserable cellmates until death in the prison of their marriage. Yes to passionate romance. Yes to close friendships. Yes to heart-to-heart conversations. Legal marriage, for me, never. Hell no. I was a sex-starved Illinois farm boy, not knowing I was gay, not knowing that millions of men worldwide have been in love and made love with men for thousands of years. I was lonely for close friendships with boys near my age. I was addicted to religion. I was addicted to junk food. I was addicted to television there on the farm in Illinois. I wasted many hundreds of precious hours watching TV westerns with glamorized violence, shallow comedies, game shows. I also watched some good programs, Roots, Donahue, Oprah, the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, but sadly so much of what I was glued to the tube for, I would have been better off using my time in other ways. I graduated high school with highest grades in my class of 49 students, but I was usually the last or one of the last chosen for a team in physical education class. As many years passed, with the help of many, many, many people, I changed greatly. I became devoted to exercise and eating only healthy food. I enjoyed sex, romance, and being naked. I became devoted to living simply. I became devoted to paying no federal income tax for U.S. wars. I became devoted to being a nonviolent activist for justice, for peace, for freedom, and having deep, personal, heart-to-heart conversations. Maggie Kuhn was a founder of the Gray Panthers, which were age and youth together in action. Maggie Kuhn died at 89 years ago. Maggie was a long-time activist against discrimination and against the Vietnam War. Maggie Kuhn said, "Do something outrageous every day." Maggie said mental health for old people requires two things. One, social action. Take a stand, protest, demonstrate, work for change. And two, sex. She had many love affairs. In her 70s, she had a love affair with a man in his 20s. And on her tombstone, Maggie wanted these words as an epitaph: "Here lies Maggie Kuhn, under the only stone she left unturned." Good night.
Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all